Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is David Talbot. I'm Managing Director and Head of Research here at Red Cloud, and I'm delighted to host a Red Cloud webinar on uranium today. And we are going to hear from F3 Uranium Chairman and CEO Dev Randhawa and President Ray Ashley. Now, during today's webinar, they will provide forward-looking statements, an overview and outlook. We'll get to as many questions as we can. You can type those questions in the chat box. But before we kick things off, first we need to discuss the fine print. During this F3 webinar, forward-looking statements may be made. I direct listeners to forward-looking statements outlined on page 2 of the corporate presentation, and that can be found on the company website, f3uranium.com. For Red Cloud Securities, I highlight this webinar is for information purposes only. It should not be considered a solicitation or recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note this call does not consider the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigation and seek their own professional advice before investing. So please see our most recent research located on the Red Cloud website for specific disclosures on F3 uranium. So with that, I now turn it over to Dev and Ray to update the audience on F3 uranium.
Sure, that's fantastic. Well, first thing I want to say is congratulations to anybody that's listening, because the market looks like nobody is. And we have these cycles. And I've always been of the opinion that it's in these bottom of the cycle is where people make money. It's where corporations go buy asset at less price with them as frothy. Rick Rule says you're a contrarian or you are a victim. And I think what we're doing today is along those terms, that we are talking at when, we're trading at 32, 33 cents. That's what the stock was when we made the first discovery, and we expanded it and etc. And uranium's gone from $50 to 85 up to 105. So it just tells you when money moves, you got to do the opposite of what everybody. Warren Buffett says, be fearful, people are greedy, and greedy until people are fearful. So I just commend anybody that's on this call. So anyways, we can start with the slide, and I'll see if I can, there it is. There's the usual legal. Some of the highlights, we put out a whole, yesterday's even some good grades, 2 meters of 18%. Back in 22, we had similar numbers. It just shows you that we're adding pounds, what we just announced yesterday, and these are some of the highlights. I agree with many who say, well, in order for our stock to move, we need to find another pod. We know that. The JF something along the A1 or the B1. But these are the highlights of the company. We're also spinning out our non-core assets, pretty well everything that's not in the Patterson Lake corridor. It's a great area, obviously, because you've got NextGen and FCU, which is now Paladin soon, hopefully. They're billion-dollar companies in the right neighborhood, and we're going to keep those into F3 and everything else put into F4. Where in it, and people say, why? Well, those properties need attention, and we know that another management person. So that's part of what we've always done before. We've had Fission Energy, FCU, F3, now F4. It's consistent with what we've always done. Also, many people forget it's been some time, but Denison has about 6-7% of the company. They went into the data room, made their choice. So it's good to have a big brother nearby if we need to do other things. I've been in the nuclear, the uranium business since 1996, and I have never seen a more perfect storm, despite what the stocks tell you. There was an email went out by John Quakes or a tweet where every country was moving towards nuclear because green energy, for it to go forward, needs nuclear. It's obvious renewables cannot fill that gap. I think all of you can do your homework on it. Just for example, wind farms, you have to have a backup oil system so to make sure there's base load power. So people are waking up to the reality that renewables are not going to fill the gap as we try to get off oil. Nuclear ban continues to increase, and it's all over the news. For me, the big difference I've seen is politically. For the first time, the left has joined. Hey, we need cleaner energy, and we're going to get there through nuclear. I always felt right of the aisle. People always did see that, and see a less reliance on oil has to come in the form of nuclear if renewables aren't going to do the trick. So that's why it's stunning how the contracting always goes lower in the summer and then loops back up. So I think you'll start to see uranium prices firm back up in the fall. Unfortunately, there's a bigger issue of the election, which people are wondering which way it's going to go before they make investments. But it's a great time to be in uranium. SMRs definitely are the future. I think that's why Bill Gates and Warren Buffett have invested so much money in Wyoming. In the real estate business, is always about location, 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 and to some degree, that's true also of uranium. You want to be where other, but I suggest that the alignment of management and shareholders is very important, and I think we've demonstrated that. In 2007, if you owned a share of Strathmore, today you own a share of Energy Fuels, you own a share of Denison, and you own a share of FCU, F4, and soon F3. And that's all dividends. Certainly a page out of Ross Beatty's book, dividending companies out. But that's what we've done. We've tried to align management and interest. And whenever we, in times like this, we would buy assets. And then you get them together, you make a discovery and take the rest and move that forward. That's been our, and I think it's a Rick Rule called serially successful. Why we in the Athabasca? It's the grade. Why is Paladin just buying our neighbor FCU, a company that Ray and I helped found with Ross? 1.2 billion, and the grade is king. And that's why people are in the Athabasca. And I believe the west side of the basin, where we are, is the future of the basin, in my view. Lots of awards we've won as a team. I'll let you go through that on your own. People often ask, like, how do you find uranium? And how did Ray and Ross and Sam, how does this team find it? Well, this box tells you a bit about all the things you look for before you drill. It's very costly to drill in the Athabasca compared to the U.S., but the grades are higher and it's worth it. So you need a conductor, you need a structural corridor, and when you look into some of the drilling, do you see alteration, bleaching? Do you see anomalous reactivity? If all these things, especially boron, are things you look for in the cheaper version, as you're vectoring in, these are very cheap things to do. I'm going to pass it on to Ray to kind of walk through our property, our property pieces, F3, F4, and what we're doing along A1 and what we're trying to achieve along B1, which are fairly parallel, but they're heading towards the Arrow and the Triple R. Over to you, Ray.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Doug. Yeah, so here it is. This is currently F3 has 20 properties, and you can see them all numbered there. The spin out Dev was talking about, spinning out F4, 17 of those properties it will be spun into F4. The reason Dev said it is that really at this point, we think that the total value of F3, all of the value is from the JR zone and the PLN project, which is the 3 properties that you can see there, 1, 2, and 3, and includes also a property we swapped with Canalaska that's adjacent. So we think our company is valued solely on that, and that we are not getting any value for the other 17 properties. that's one of the reasons we're planning to spin it out. The other is so that we can independently fund ongoing exploration in those other projects, give F3 shareholders and others a chance to get in on the ground level again. So this really shows the reasoning for that. We have option agreements with several companies, a new one on the Murphy Lake property, that's number 18, which is near ISO's Hurricane deposit. That option agreement calls for camps to earn 50%. They would be spending sole funding $5 million in exploration in year 1 and year 2, and then they have the option to go to 70%. That's also going on at Hardy Bay and Clearwater West, where we are currently drilling. So by spinning it out, we'll be able to independently finance and move forward with all these other projects that we've really held since 2014. And so we know quite a lot about them. We know what the next steps are, and we've really completed a lot of the ground geophysics that needs to be done in order to get to the drilling stage. So really though, F3 needs, and our shareholders want us, and the market wants us to be focused at JR as we do. We understand, Dev alluded to it, that the next step change to F3 is if we can tag into discover another zone. And that's what we're busy doing right now, is exploring at JR, infilling JR and exploring to try and discover the next zone. So there you see what F3 will retain. It's a very big project. It's 106,000 acres. There's many conductive trends. We currently are focused on, you see the yellow star is the JR zone and the A1 and B1 shear zones. And we are seeing really all of the signs, alteration, anomalous geochemistry, pathfinder elements, huge shear zones, all of the signs that really tell us that we stand to be close to something big. So I'll zoom in and show you where our drilling is going on right now. So this is the JR zone itself. It's at the very north end of the A1 shear zone. What you can see is the winter drilling. The last 2 assays of the winter drilling are the red labeled holes, and news release we put out yesterday is from that hole 124, 137. Dev alluded to it. It hit the 15-meter wide JR zone, 3.2% uranium over 15 meters with the high-grade core. There are several more holes that we are planning to drill at JR. The main thing that we're doing now is making sure that we can establish continuity on this ultra high-grade core and high-grade core. A lot of the pounds at the JR zone lens will be contained within that high-grade core. So these drill holes specifically target gaps in that to make sure that we can establish continuity there, in preparation for an eventual maiden resource estimate on this lens. In the meantime, what we're focused on doing is discovering the next zone of mineralization. Often these deposits in the Athabasca Basin, they occur as several lenses of mineralization along usually a very narrow structure. That's the theory that we're exploring right now. And I'll zoom out and show you our drilling, which is exploration drilling looking for the next zone. So you see that that red box at the very top of this map is the JR zone lens. It's the map we were just looking at. Now you see the A1 shear zone. So JR is at the north end of it. And in the south part, that's the B1 main shear zone. What we've learned, if you see where A1 meets what's called the Harrison Fault. So A1 meets the Harrison Fault right here. That's the Harrison Fault is this. So that intersection, this Harrison Fault is really quite a significant thing. There's 100 meters of offset on this fault. So it's a very major reverse structure. And the scale of that is really what's significant. Where A1, we found that A1 now has a splay. It's that the A1 shear zone splits into two. We call that the northern, they're called horses. So that's the north horse and then the main A1 shear zone. And there they are intersecting this major Harrison fault. And B1, it's also near the north end of B1 and the south end of A1. So yesterday's news release also released geochemistry, so uranium assays for hole 152. And you can see on this map that little green dot. That little green dot is uranium mineralization. So that is the best geochemistry that we've intersected to date outside the JR zone. It's just 0.05% uranium. But I can remind people that over here, I'm going to just turn this on. Over here,
Ashley, it looks like Ray, you've left the room somehow. So I'll wait for Ray to come back. Yeah, again, Ray's back in the room. There we go.
Oh,
Ray.
there you go. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, I just got kicked out. So you can see this little green dot is a hole we drilled in 2014, and that had 0.05% uranium in it. It's what led us to coming back in 2019 and eventually finding the JR zone at the end of 2022. So that uranium geochemistry is very significant to us because it's accompanied by all of the other signs that we see. Now that's opened up brand new targets for us. It's going to be where the A1 horse and the A1 main shear zone intersect this Harrison fault. We think we see, that we are, what happens down here is B1 shear zone is actually, it's alteration and deformation over a width of 400 meters. That is quite unusual in the uranium exploration in the basin. If you look at the JR zone, for example, that is a 35-meter wide shear zone. And within that is the JR mineralization, JR zone. And if you step outside of that, the rocks are very fresh. If you go down here at the north end of B1, our drilling is finding a very wide zone of deformation and alteration. So really, it speaks to me to the chance that we're close to something really big. But what it also does is it makes it more difficult for us to hone in on, to focus in on the, where the localization of all this alteration, which is the next zone, mineralized zone that we think is there. So there it is. This is a very significant result to us. That really our drilling now is focused in this area at where the Harrison fault intersects A1 and the A1 horse, and as well where B1 intersects that. And we've also working on inversions of EM and resistivity data together, which is leading us to be looking again at the B1 shear zone itself. And that data is letting us refine the geophysics over the B1 shear zone to generate targets on that as well. So that's our current area of focus. And we really do continue to see the signs that we're close to something big, and it's absolutely warranted to carry on. We have about 7 million of flow through left right now, and that our burn rate's about $1.5 million a month. So we see that flow through taking us all the way till Christmas, as we carry on to drill and look for the next zone of mineralization, really, and drill the final few holes at JR to establish continuity of the zone. So, yeah, just show you some cross sections quickly. This is the north end of B1 where there's no sandstone. The yellow is sandstone. We stepped south of that 600 meters and found suddenly 240 meters of sandstone. So we went drilling in between is where we found this very significant Harrison Fault, this reverse wedge with 100 meters. So that distance is 100 meters, 130 meters. So it's a really significant throw on that fault. We drilled more holes, and then the next section shows you, it will show you that this wedge actually is coming out of the page of that. You'll see a smiley face, which is the sandstone in the bottom there. And now you can see hole 150. That's the sandstone in the bottom. You can see this hole 152. This is hole 152. This is hole 152. Sorry, I can't, I'm not, anyway. And you can see the two radioactive ticks along that hole. And that's from our assays have come back with 0.05% uranium, and they line up with the A1 shear zone and the main horst. So it's, our news release says it there, it's 7 meters actually of 0.14%, and up to almost 0.05% uranium in each one of those intersections. So you see that we haven't drawn the shear zones. That's because we need to be convinced as to the orientation of all of these shear zones that we're intersecting. Everything meets here at this Harrison Fault, and that's why we're going slowly to try and narrow and focus our way in on the high grade zone that we think's there. Just quickly, this is the first hole that discovered the wedge. You see basement rocks above sandstone. That's when we knew we'd hit a big reverse fault. The white rocks that you see there in the middle is actually granite right at that contact, and that's one of the targets. That's where, looking at other uranium deposits in the basin, that's a target area. Our new geochemistry is just in front of that. Now here's the actual hole 152. The mineralization is here. That's the mineralization is there in the main shear zone, and it's over here in the horst. So, you know, it's all pointing to us getting closer and closer to the zone we think is there. So this is what we are now looking at regionally. If you see A1 and B1 are in the blue trough, and you see the label for the GR zone, what you're looking at is airborne mobile MT that we flew in the summer. So you can see some of the other parallel trends that we've completed a big gravity survey over all of those. And that gap in the bottom is the PW property that also has gravity completed there. We're still inverting that gravity data, and that's going to lead to follow up. We'll follow up with ground EM on any gravity lows that come out of that interpretation. And we see ourselves getting to those regional targets, you know, on structures that are parallel to A1, B1. We see ourselves getting there not until next winter now, mostly because we see such favorable signs, and continuing with each drill hole, we see better signs and think we're getting closer and closer to the next zone. So that I picture us drilling on those other trends next winter, really. So that's it for now. You see the cash in the bank. There's basically 29 million in cash. And as I mentioned, 7 million of that is flow through. Really, that's the update on where we're at.
Yeah, thank you, Ray. Now, there are some questions here on the F3, F4. Yeah, basically, you know, unfortunately, we in the business sometimes use terms that just, you know, bounce off our head. And, but the spin out basically means if you own a share a certain date, and you will get a free share. If you own a share of F3, you'll get a free share of F4. You don't have to do anything. You get 1 for 1. But because we want to have less shares out, we're doing 10 for 1 rollbacks, so 47 million, but still, you get 1 for 1, and then it's rollback. It's not rollback first, then you get 1 for 10. No, there's a bit of confusion out there. So that's something we're excited about, and that's one of the questions. But that spin out just means it's a butterfly. One of this, one of that. So I don't know if there are questions, or David, you want to kick off some questions?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Dev. Ray, great presentation as always. So, yeah, let's kick off the Q&A portion of the webinar. A reminder to everybody, if you have a question, just type it into the chat box and we'll get to as many as we can here. Guys, or at least Dev, every time you have a conversation or we have a conversation, you're always talking about nuclear power. Obviously a strong nuclear industry helps support uranium prices. How well does the F3 price share track the uranium price?
That's a great question. I think it's always when uranium first moves, obviously next gen Denison will move and Paladins and those ones move first because that's money always trickles down. So I think they always get the first. And then because money moves to cash and we're illiquid, people will sell and try to move to cash to the sidelines. And that's where small companies like us, Sask and others just get beat up. It's a great buying opportunity, but it's frustrating to explain to investors there's nothing we're doing or not doing. In fact, we put out results today that are pretty good and stock just sits there. So it's the mood of the market right now. Unfortunately, that is not positive, but September's not that far away. And that's when all the contracting starts. And we've always seen that. So unfortunately, it's cyclical. And then on top of it, you got this election, who's going to win in the US. So whatever side you're on, it doesn't matter. It's created uncertainty, as to who's going to win. Anyways, there's that. The question of inside ownership, I think it's around 5-6%. You have to keep in mind, I've owned some last year since 1997. We just keep spinning out, and that's why there's so many shares out. Maybe we can't really give an update on Clear West drilling, only because, I can't tell you something that the public doesn't know and don't want anybody in trouble. So
yeah, I can just say that the drilling's ongoing right now, and that when the time's right, we'll be releasing, those results when the time's right. But the program's going well, and we're happy with what we're seeing. We'll release that when at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just glad we're out there. People often say, "How did you guys make 3 discoveries?" Well, we kept drilling. You can't stop. Even if it's a little bit, you gotta, exploration company got to explore. Whether you're doing 1 hole every week or 2 weeks, it doesn't matter. You got to keep drilling, and that's why we raise money at 56 cents. When you raise money when you can, not when you have to. And I think there's a lot of criticism of a recent company last week that at a major discount raised some money, and it just, and rightfully so, in my opinion, got shareholder ire. This is not the time you're raising money. We're funded. We're fine. Hopefully as you'll see, I said some clarity as we get closer to election time, but also the contracting time with utilities will pick up this fall. That's just seasonal the way it's been. That's why the WNA is held early, and Dave is doing a dinner on September 5th. That's when things start to percolate.
Well, you keep drilling, but I think you also make smart decisions. You spend your money wisely in geophysics. That's how you get your targets. So maybe, Ray, what kind of targets are you trying to hit? You're using EM, you're using gravity. How do you find the deposit even before you're drilling?
Yeah, look, it's a good question, Dave. We've got the luxury of having used geophysics for a long time now, over 3 different deposits. So we've seen the different signatures and like how these physical properties are related to changes in physical properties relative to where the pods are. So, the geophysics is the first pass. We've done some really new things. Normally it's been gravity, EM, and resistivity. And first it's in the air, and then we get on the ground, and it allows to refine those models and inversions from the ground data. One of the things we've done this year is, well, we used a different kind of EM, which let us look through the conductive manville. There's a mudstone there that we had trouble looking through with EM in the past. So we overcame that with a new, it's like airborne magnetotelluric survey. So it uses currents that flowing naturally occurring currents below the mudstone. That was one new thing we used. Another thing we're doing is supercomputers have now allowed the inversion of resistivity data and EM data at the same time. They both measure conductivity, but at two extremes. So those two data sets have never been able to be looked at together. And now so it was fairly costly, but that's allowed us to look at the two data sets in a new way. And now we have all of this data inverted, all of it in 3D, and we look at all that together. We can see where the JR zone sits relative to all of that, and it guides us to starting to drill, which is how we got to where we are, David. We use geophysics to get to the north end of B1 to find that Harrison reverse fault. Now really it's drilling that's guiding where we go. And that's why we're not drilling, we're slowing down the rate at which we drill down at Harrison, the end of A1, this new area of 152, the B1 shear zone itself, because drilling is really what has to guide us now. I mean, the geophysics establishes kind of big targets. Now when and it successfully has helped us to find what we found. And it's, really looks like we keep getting closer to something, David. And yeah, and that we're just finalizing this inversion of the two data sets, and we're seeing good things that are going to guide where we, guide the next set of drill holes that go and look for, because there stands to be more than one zone. We see a big wide alteration area, and we're trying to zero in on the source that's in there. We have beautiful geophysics to guide the drilling.
Okay, I think you've touched on 2 or 3 or 4 of the questions that are going to come down the road, but maybe let's get in order here. In order to generate value for the early stage projects, you guys have talked about the spin out. When do you anticipate the spin out of these 17 F3 exploration assets into F4? When's that expected to be we
final date is 15th, right? August 15th.
Yeah, but we still got we're going through the special meeting right now, which I want to apologize to people for our lawyers kind of overdoing it, but the slides have gone with the wind and it was heavy in people getting it. So I apologize to people if it filled their mailbox, but it's a different world of ESG today than we've had before. So, but we have a meeting coming up, but if all goes well, yeah, on the 15th, if you own it, I mean, this is the time to be buying any kind of uranium shares. Like I remember Rick once saying, whenever he started funds, it wasn't the fund that mattered or what commodity, it's when in the cycle he did. Right now, I think you can, whether it's NextGen, us, Cameco, great buys, because just as the mood of the market. Fundamentals haven't changed. Sure, uranium's fell a little bit, but it's not $50, and that's how these stocks are trading.
Right. And these F4 assets, these aren't simply moose pasture. They've been in your company for a long, long time. You've held them through a couple cycles before anybody else was even interested in uranium. So, when do you think you'll be able to start exploring for them? Do you have a budget for this year, or is your preference really to act as a project generator and have other people spend the money on them?
I think at this point, it's a project generator. We have something with camp people, Traction and others. But, we also got to realize that these are ugly, ugly markets. And, those people have a hard time raising money. So, have to cut them some slack. But yeah, I think at this point, project generation, given the market cap of the company will be around 7 million, how much can you raise without giving away the farm? So you got to be careful to raise little bits and do a little bit of work, prove we're worthy, and go from there.
Yeah, and that's why I like that we're starting with, with these option agreements. The plans aren't finalized, but we're drilling now at Clearwater West. The plan is in the fall. If camps can raise all the money and manage to get forward, that we would be drilling at Murphy Lake in the fall. And again, it lets us just get going without needing to raise too much money right at the start. And these are some of the, Murphy Lake has some really good indications from drilling F3 did in 2022. We found alteration, we found sniffs of uranium. So that's how we can generate some news.
Yeah.
And
there's a question here. We don't plan to do any equity financing right now. As we mentioned earlier, we've got 23 odd million hard. We've got, there's no need to. We got enough flow through money to last through the year to see us through this downward in the summer. We've got a number of partners, but JV partners, people come to us to JV with us generally when uranium is getting hot. So right now, no one's knocking down our door. This is the right time to be doing deals. But unfortunately, sometimes corporate executives act like retail investors and kind of, and not being contrarian, right? That's what, good corporate citizens would be doing. We don't have any off takes because generally to have an off take, you've got to have a 43,101 pounds like we did in FCU. We had one, and then we did a deal with CGN when we were running Fission Energy. We did an offtake with KEPCO, but again, we had a 43,101. So that's one of our reasons we are drilling where we are with JR, is to be able to have a resource assessment sometime done, probably next year. We'll see. It all depends on the results. So there's no offtakes until you have those 43,101s.
Yeah, something further down the road. Absolutely. Yeah. So, okay. And with your $23 million hard, what's your budget for this year?
Well, we're going to spend all the, use the flow through money through the winter. That's basically it. And then, keep the hard money. Hard money, you always get it at a discount, right, David? So you protect that like gold. You can get flow through money at, there used to be deltas of 50, 60%. Now with Trudeau's wonderful capital gains plan, I think is more 1.3 to 1.4. So you're still getting at a premium, but not like we were getting before.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, well, certainly we're drilling now, David. We're going right through till Christmas at the very least, without the need, and conceivably into the winter too, without the need for raising any more flow through in the short term.
Okay.
And it's nice to be in the position where we don't need to. We can think about it. If the time gets right, we can consider it. But right now, we don't have a need.
Right. Okay. And now we've already sort of started talking about the JR zone, and this is on the PLN project, your flagship. I'm thinking you said resource next year. I'm waving my arms. I think there could already be maybe 20 million pounds there right now based on drilling, and that's only the one zone. But you guys, you don't think this is just the one zone, right? You'd expect other pods along trend in parallel structures, right?
We absolutely do, David.
Yeah, I don't think, our history, when you look at, whether, I'm not saying this is a triple R, be 100 odd million pounds, but generally they come in like pearls on a necklace. We just haven't found the other pearls. But it could be a B1. But the property we're still talking like this it's a small piece of the big PLN property. There's another conductor above that we've looked at. We'll probably drill in the winter because it's on the lake. And further south, there's A3, this A4. This is not a one-trick pony conductor. This thing is very pregnant with a number of corridors, structural corridors, and graphitic. So there are more than just this A1 and B1 that we talk about. There are other areas. The Harrison, fault is just huge. I mean, it's a couple hundred kilometers. So we think these are robust faults. We're going to find other ones we think that we can test.
Mm-hmm. And, there is a high-grade core there as well to JR zone. I think many hits exceed 10%. I think you announced a 19% hit today. But what's the importance of knowing the specific size of that high-grade zone within the larger deposit?
Well, look, I think the easy answer, David, is to look at triple R. And at triple R, there's a high-grade core in the 780 pod as well. And when you look at the way that deposit was modeled, there's a lot of pounds contained within the high-grade core, not, as a percentage of the total resource that's there. So what's important to that is having drill hole density that's sufficiently tight on that core to properly define it, so that it's modeled as a continuous, it can be modeled as a continuous body shape. And that's really, we see the same thing at JR. That's why we're making sure that we're drilling those few additional holes to establish that continuity before doing the resource estimate. It just to make sure that we come up with the correct number of pounds, if you know what I mean, that are there. Not a lot of holes left to drill. I think that the other thing about that high grade core is that it speaks to the nature of the mineralizing fluids that happened there. And to me, I was talking to the VP of one of the major uranium companies, and his comment to me was, because of that, the chances to him, because of that, the chances of additional zones were that we defined a system, not a zone. That's what it meant to him. And look, really down at Harrison and the news release we put out today, those results keep pointing to our belief that we're really close to another zone. And it's, because it's so wide, unusually wide, because we've got sniffs of radioactivity over 600 meters down around Harrison and B1 and the end of A1 there. Because of all that, I personally think there's, that there stands to be something bigger there. I mean, we don't know for a fact, but that's how really positive the indications are in the exploration we're doing in that area. And that's why we're focused in that area right now, because it looks so positive, David.
Yeah, the geology and the thinking always matures, right? It changes, it evolves. I think 6 months ago we weren't talking about the Harrison Fault. 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago, we weren't talking about the B1 main shear, right? So I guess that Harrison Fault that you mentioned this morning, how do you believe this might be influencing the structures in this area, or even maybe the mineralization in this area near this A1 shear, the North Horse shear, and maybe even the B1 shear a little bit further to the east?
Well, look, that's very good point. Okay. If the the Harrison Fault is a very long thing. It actually, and it's an arcuate thing. And it's thought to be one of the main structures that created the actual Athabasca Basin. So it was an early and massive normal fault that would have been responsible for one of the structures that created the Athabasca Basin that then got filled with the sandstone. That structure snakes around and ends up going very close to just south of Cree Bay, to a uranium deposit up there. The name of it's escaped me, but that, it's very proximal to Shea Creek. It goes right near Shea Creek. And when we read the technical reports about Shea Creek, that fault, the Harrison Fault, is mentioned as being near that uranium mineralization, that it may have some relationship. Well, we don't know that either, but now we're actually, because of the latest news release and the confirmation in hole 152, we now are actually targeting the Harrison Fault itself. And you pointed that out correctly, which we never would have thought to do in the past. Where the shear zones intersects the Harrison Fault is now that constitutes upcoming drill targets.
Mm-hmm. And we are seeing an offset there, right? How important is the offset in the unconformity? Because we often see these offsets between, let's say, 10, 40, even 120 meters or so, often due to reverse faults. But I think you just said this is a normal fault, did you?
Well, originally we think it was a normal fault. Now it's the Harrison Fault. Where we're drilling it is clearly a normal fault. Sorry, a reverse fault. Okay. It's clearly that. And that is what's is the common association with, uranium zones in the basin. That's often what it is. So what's significant, David, is, look, usually if there's a reverse fault associated with a zone of mineralization, it's in the order of a few meters or 10 meters. That's the amount of throw on the reverse fault. What we're seeing is 130 meters of throw on the reverse fault. What that just implies is it's been a lot of movement on the structure when it was reactivated. And what that does is just break the sandstone is very broken above, like, you know, brecciated and big broken sandstone. And in the basement, a feature of that scale causes a lot more permeability and pathways for fluid. So that's why the alteration zone we think is so wide. But the thing is, it's not just wide alteration, it's also accompanied by all the right signs, sniffs of uranium, radioactivity, now mineralization, all the different species of clay, elevated boron, all these things that normally are very proximal to high grade zones are right in there. And the fact to me that there's so much throw on this fault is why we're seeing bigger zones of silicification and evidence of fluid, hydrothermal flow, fluid flow, and very large volumes of fluid going through all the rocks there. And I think it just creates more pathways, more permeability, and ultimately, I mean, we don't know, but to me, it stands to indicate that there's something bigger there to discover, just due to the scale of everything we're seeing there. And if you look at one of the biggest uranium deposits in the basin, it's in a similar setting where there's a big reverse fault down there. I think it's 40 meters of throw, which is significant. A lot of uplift, right? Here we're looking at 130 meters of uplift. And the deposit that I'm talking about is right there along the face of this reverse fault in the lower sandstone. So it's the right setting. And now we see all the right signs and confirmed by uranium assays.
Sounds like MacArthur Mine to me. So.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, we don't know that that's there, but the setting's similar, okay?
Yeah. So what can you say? And you know, I apologize for so many geological questions today, but that's, I think, the crux of why we're here. You know, what can you say about the intensity and the extent of alteration here? You know, does it differ than many other projects in the Athabasca Basin?
I would say absolutely yes. Okay. What's normal is that even if there's a big wide structural corridor, there ends up being one fault or structure within that, a shear zone that's some 30 meters wide, where the pods of uranium are localized. And then if you were to drill on each side of that shear zone, like 30 meters away from high grade, the rocks are fresh. No, not a sniff of uranium, no clay alteration, no nothing. Fresh rocks. If you look at what we're drilling down at the north end of B1, it's 400 meters wide, not 30 meters or 40, 50 meters wide. It's 400 meters wide. The alteration is as wide as Arrow is long, basically, okay? That's how significant it is. So, you know, what does that mean? It means, along with sniffs of uranium, along with deformation, graphitic structures, and the sniffs of uranium are all the way across this zone. A big, wide area of alteration with all the right signs. You know, it makes it harder to narrow in on the uranium, right? Because 30 meters away from the pod, arguably, you don't know that you're that close to it. So it's harder to find it because the alteration is wider. But, you know, what does that mean? It's not clear. To me, it means we stand to have a bigger zone of mineralization there. But that has yet, you know, we have yet to prove that it's there and to find it. But it's really encouraging to me to find such a wide zone of alteration down near this huge wedge at the south end of A1 and the north end of B1. It all comes together there, and we're seeing all the right signs there.
Right. Okay. Yeah, you sort of answered my next question about the B1 main shear. You know, lots of alteration, intense structure. So, you know, what does this suggest about the B1 trend? You said you think you're going to find something, but it's very difficult to find.
Yeah, B1 is the north end of B1 is even wider. Okay, the south end of A1 is still, now it's two splays. It's split into two, but the north end of B1 is where it's even wider. Okay.
Okay. Great. Well, let's leave it there, guys. I want to thank Devin Ray from F3 Uranium for joining us today. Thank you, everybody else, for tuning in. Red Cloud Securities will be back next week when Alina sits down with Latin Resources. So that's Tuesday, August 6th at 2 p.m. Eastern. So have a great day, everyone, and thank you for supporting Red Cloud's webinar series.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Ray.